Hi, this is Kirsten.
And this is Christopher Shockey. We're the authors of the Big Book of Cidermaking.
And you're listening to Cider Chat.
Welcome to Cider Chat. My name is Rhea Windcaller, and I am the producer and cider MC of this weekly podcast, where we speak with makers, cider enthusiasts, and folks within the cider trade from around the world. This is episode 231, and we are speaking with the authors of the Big Book of Cidermaking. So what better time than now to fill your glass and get ready for this chat. And while you're pouring out your cider, I will share with you a wee bit of news out and about in Ciderville. Well, it sure is good to be back and chatting with you, Ciderville. If you're a regular subscriber to this here podcast and you wait for it to come out each week, you might have noticed that the 2 weeks prior to this one, I wasn't posting an episode because I was having a staycation. So I stayed at home, stayed safe, got a lot of things on my to-do list done. But it's always nice chit-chatting with you and sharing what is going on in the greater world, what we call Ciderville. And if you're new to the podcast, well, the Ciderville is all the perfect spots around the world where we're just digging libations made out of palms and sharing good news. So if you're new, I recommend that you do subscribe now because this is such a fun group of people. And, I missed you. Anyways, so let's get on with the first bit of news here. I'm going to just take a little breather, and I'll be right back.
Walking through the orchards, dancing in the streets, smelling all the blossoms, kicking up our feet.
Cider is a farm-to-table product, right? You got to have the orchard, you got to pick the fruit, you got to keep it going. Because there's a pandemic doesn't mean that the trees stop producing. So already, all of us who like to make cider are looking at the trees, making sure that, they're good, knowing which trees are producing, which ones are biannual. And then, at least for those of us who are in the Northern Hemisphere, if you're in the Southern Hemisphere, you are bottling, right? That's what you're doing right now, getting ready for that next stage because you're in the middle of your winter as we are in the heat of our summer. But so it just shows you that how we are in this kind of continuous cycle. And that's what's so awesome about this community is that we have to be movers and shakers because the fruit keeps on producing and we want to do something with it. In fact, we almost get into like a frenzy once a harvest comes, like, gotta get the apples. No, I could get one more bushel out of that. I've been there. I've done it. Actually, this past weekend, I was racking over all my cider from 2019, emptied my big old barrel, and now I'll be looking at bottling myself. I normally wait almost a year before I take out any of my cider and put it in little vessels, whether they're kegs or larger format bottles or small bottles, whatever I have that I've been able to save. And that's because I'm not a commercial maker, so I get to have that long period of time and storage. So that's what I'm looking forward to, and I'm already thinking about what can I make this fall. It is the best kind of addiction to have. I think you agree, right? So with all that, and with the fact that a lot of things have been canceled, let me bring you up to date with some of the things I know. And certainly this doesn't cover it all. But there's a lot of different associations, both in the U.S., who have been having virtual cider weeks taking place. That took place in New York, took place out in the Pacific Northwest. People are really trying to bring the conversation forward. I don't know about you, but I've been seeing a drop more in like the Zoom conversations that are having around tastings or even on Instagram. I think we're a little fatigued on that. You're not out of the loop. Don't worry if you're not joining that or you're not feeling up for that. That's going to happen during this time. which is why the book that we're going to be talking about is really awesome, because that's another way to stay connected. And of course, listening to this podcast is a great way to stay connected, which is my first reminder. If you want to send in an audio snapshot, a 2-minute audio snapshot of what's happening in your perfect spot of Ciderville, you could do that easily by just recording that via your voice recorder on your smartphone or perhaps on your laptop, and just send it my way to ria@ciderchat.com. And it could be about how you're managing in the pandemic, around your tasting room. If you aren't a commercial maker and you just want to talk about what you're looking forward to in the fall in cider, please do that. We just love hearing from people around the world. So that's one way to stay connected. And now let's look at some of the updates about cider festivals and events and tours for the remainder of 2020. In case you haven't heard, the England Cider Tour that I was hosting and leading has been postponed till 2021. That just makes me kind of like, I'm sad, of course, but I'm kind of gleeful because I'm just looking forward to 2021, and we're going to be offering it again. So if you didn't check out that tour, go to the Totally Cider page at ciderchat.com and take a look at that itinerary and the people we're going to be seeing. It is just an amazing tour. So that's for 2021. Coming up further in the fall of 2020 is the annual Franklin County Cider Days, and that takes place in my special spot in Ciderville. It's the oldest cider fest in the U.S., and this would have been the 26th year. Well, we being the people on the committee for Cider Days, we're doing a honed-down version. There's going to be a cider trail offering, and that's not going to just be on the weekend of Cider Day. So it's going to be a little bit more spread out so that we don't have like a whole complement of people coming in on that weekend. And it looks like there'll be some online offerings too. So look forward to that. Now I'm going to switch over to 2021. And as of this publishing of this episode here, 221, we are looking at Cider Con, which is the annual trade conference for the American Cider Association. That's going to take place this year in Chicago, and as far as I know, they are still moving forward with Cider Con. It's going to be on February 2nd through the 5th. The conference ends on Friday, but there's always a cider summit at the Navy Pier in Chicago, which is fan-frickin-tastic. So that is Cider Con. And at the same time, they're going to have the next Cider Expo is going to be taking place again in Caen. That's in Normandy, France. And that takes place February 6th through the 8th. So a little tight there if you're going to Cider Con. I'm not sure really how you would do it. It's tough. And to tell you the truth, I was looking at offering a tour to Normandy to go to Cider Expo. And right now, I'm holding back on offering that. I'm good to go if COVID changes and we start seeing a magnificent drop in that. But I am looking at a potential tour for February 6th through the 8th to go to Normandy. But, it's a pandemic, so we don't know. In which case, we'll just keep on looking forward because cider ain't going anywhere. We're sticking around. So that's all the news I want to really update with you right now. And just, again, the reminder, things change, be patient, and just know that postpone is just an opportunity for cider at a later date. I'm ready to move into our featured chat. And before we go there, I just want to say I'm holding the book in my hand right now. This is a beautiful book, and you could tell that these folks are authors of other how-to books. They're going to be telling you exactly what they do and their background, but just listen to the air blowing through the pages. The smell of a new book, it's just beautiful. I'm really stoked to be able to talk about how these authors have made cider making accessible to all. So without further ado, let's all grab a glass and join this chat. Well, I'd like to welcome both Christopher and Kristen Shockey. They are the authors of the Big Book of Cidermaking, which is a 2020 publication. And I want to tell you, this is an amazing encyclopedia of knowledge and a picture show book. It's an absolute delight for me to have the opportunity to speak both of you on Cider Chat. So thank you very much for that. You're based in Applegate, Oregon. That's just absolutely amazing to me. Applegate, it just lends a whole idea of apples, of course, but you're much bigger than that because you're focusing on the Big Book of Cidermaking in terms of apples. But let's share with Ciderville a bit of the background of your story about who you are. You've authored a number of books, and they all are around fermentation. Can you share a bit more?
We moved to Applegate in 1998. It's been a while. And the first thing that we found was that we have these amazing Centurion apple trees. So the first thing we bought was a cider press. And that's one of the first things we started fermenting was cider. But meanwhile, lots of twists and turns. We started a small sauerkraut company while we were waiting for our new grafted cider apples to grow and, have enough to make some cider commercially. And we started doing vegetable ferments. And that kind of led us down this whole slope of, it was 2010, gut health, and all those things were just barely coming onto the scene, and people were curious. We were not the cool kids at the market, I want to say. I mean, people would kind of come in the booth, they'd see pretty colors, thinking maybe they'd get jam, and then they'd back out carefully. But what we learned standing there is people wanted to understand these foods. And so we wrote Fermented Vegetables to kind of be a vegetable fermentation, lactic acid fermentation class. From that, we moved to condiments around the world and wrote Fiery Ferments, again, lactic acid fermentation. And then our publisher asked us to go into sort of the Asian ferments, Miso, Tempeh, Natto, lots of beans and grains, and koji, which you can also use for alcohol fermentation. And then finally, we got to do where it started.
Yeah. I had this kind of question in my mind. I love the term fermentation. I've been a member of the Valley Fermenters, which is a homebrew group, and we don't call ourselves brewers; we call ourselves fermenters. And so I was wondering for you both, in terms of fermentation, what is the one consistent piece that you see through, whether you're talking about miso, or you're talking about fermented vegetables, something like a sauerkraut, or fiery ferments, a little bit more spicier. Is there something that there's a continuity between all these that they're doing the same process?
Yeah, I think in almost all cases, it's about microbes doing what they want to do, and humans setting up the right environment so that the microbes that you want to do their thing get to do it, and the microbes that you don't want or don't lend themselves to the final product, get taken out or prohibited in some way. And I think all those basically do that same thing. Sometimes it's bacteria, sometimes it's yeast, sometimes it's fungal, but in all cases, you're following the natural path of one or more microbes to do what they want to do best.
Yeah, I like to say it's like working with millions of tiny chefs, and you sort of just need to get out of the way and let them go to work.
I love that. And I could tell a little bit of both of your personalities out of that, where Christopher's talking about microbes and you're talking about chefs. That's beautiful. I also have this question. What does your house smell like?
Depends on the day of the week.
A story, we built a certified kitchen with his and her fermenting caves. We have 3 kitchens and 2 bathrooms. The upstairs at one point had Kirsten's mother and father-in-law, and one time he came down and was sure that the house had a gas leak and was trying to get everybody out of the house. And we assured him there was no gas to our house, and it was just the kimchi. We had done 10 or 20 gallons of kimchi, and the fermenting cave for the kimchi was right under their bedroom. So that's when we learned that some ferments have a very strong odor that can be misinterpreted at times.
That's exactly what I was kind of thinking. You must have this really eclectic, aromas that come through. And for the uninitiated, it must be super interesting. That's a wonderful story. I love it.
I don't want to scare away the cider makers, but I'm a vinegar maker also. And so get some good acid.
Talk about testing a cider maker's marriage.
It's pretty common these days to be finding cideries who are also working with vinegar. From your perspective on that, people kind of like step away and say, no, don't do that because then you're going to turn all your cider into vinegar. How do you manage that in your home?
We have so many things that shouldn't be with each other, and they all are. I think it's just a matter of knowing what you're working with and what their parameters are, because they all have such different needs. For example, acetic bacteria need oxygen. So if you're a cider maker and you keep things, relatively sanitized and you keep the oxygen off of your cider, you're not going to get vinegar. And we work with Bacillus subtilis, which is considered a spoiler in most cases. And, they say, don't make natto where you make anything else, especially sake or, cider or something alcoholic. But, it has such different needs. Like that microbe needs something very different than the yeast needs. And so to me, it's just what Christopher had said. If you know your microbes' parameters, you're going to be in good shape.
Right. Or all the chefs have to get along with each other is another way to look at it, too.
Exactly. I like it.
And they do. The title of your book, The Big Book of Cidermaking, how did you choose that particular title?
Well, our publisher had another book kind of in that big book of naming. And we always... Initially, it was a lot bigger book than it even is now. So initially, we had chapters in there. There's 3 chapters in particular. We wanted people to know about orcharding because we really are kind of self-taught orchardists. So if somebody wanted to pull out some lawn and put in some cider apples, how to do that. And that became a pretty good sized chapter. We had a chapter on going into business for yourself because having been in a fermentation business, there's a lot to think about. And we initially wanted to be a cidery. But we went the other way with another ferment. And then we had the third chapter, which turned out to be a huge chapter, was a chapter on vinegar because we saw it holistically as the Big Book of Cidermaking would include where cider wants to naturally go, which is to vinegar. But Kirsten wrote a chapter that was so complete and so large that we both got an email back from the editor. And I think the subject line was something like, we need to talk about vinegar. And that's when she got kicked out.
Well, you touch upon vinegar here. You touch about so many topics.
We wanted to make this kind of a choose your adventure. So we wanted to engage people in the very beginning with, hey, what do you want to do? Do you want to make your own version of, an Angry Orchard variety that you love? Do you want to make your own version of something you remember your grandfather doing on a farm? What do you want to do? And so it was kind of opening people up to the idea that you can choose your adventure. You can decide what you want to do. We talked about equipment, and we really did that from let's start super basic. You just need a container. And then if you have a little more money, maybe a hydrometer would be good. And we kind of staggered it so people could, as they had the budget, add things in an order that we thought was important for starting out. And then we talked about a master process. So we really kind of laid out, if you're going from apple to finished, what's that look like? And if you're buying juice from the store, what's that look like? So no matter where you're joining the bus on that adventure, it's okay. I mean, this is a no judgment book. We didn't want you, there's some that say, you have to do pitched or you have to use commercial or it's all about wild. And for us, it's both. So then we get into recipes and we cover wild ciders and cultivated ciders so people can understand the differences between those. And then we cover things like crafting cider with wild botanical yeast, which I think speaks to some of the cider makers who've been doing it for a while and really want to try something different that they maybe haven't thought about, to infuse some new local flavor to a cider. Then we did infused ciders. We got into a little bit heavier stuff because some people want to make, a cider that tastes like their favorite Chardonnay. So we got to get that alcohol up a little bit. So we talked about that in terms of wines and spirited ciders. And then the last chapter was just on drinking, because we thought it was really important that, it can be kind of intimidating. For example, Kristen and I's palates are very different. She can pick up things that I can't, which is really handy, which means I can drink lesser grade ciders and wines happily. And Kirsten will be like, no, I'm not going to spend my time drinking that cider or that wine. So it's okay. And so, like whatever palate you were given and whatever you taste, how to really focus on that, and so that you can really enjoy things and understand what you like and what you don't like. And then we've got a troubleshooting section. We've got an apple variety section in the back. We've got a pretty big index with sources, because we thought it's always helpful to have a latest kind of version of what's out there, including podcasts, by the way. And by the way, Cider Chat is the only podcast we chose to put in that index of resources.
Feels absolutely honored to be in this incredible encyclopedia the two of you wrote. Going back to that equipment, so what Christopher was talking about, they've listed 3 steps there, the very basics. So if you want to get into cider making, they make it so approachable in the Big Book of Cidermaking, and then gear you up. And a lot of people will tell somebody starting out to get a technical piece of equipment, and that even the name can scare you, which is called a hydrometer.
Totally.
And so I love that. So I'm wondering, this kind of leads me into that next question. And we're talking about this already, between the chef and the microbes. But how does two people who live together, you're a married couple, how do you write a book together? How do you make that happen and do that so well?
95% of the time, I'd say we have the same vision for the book, and it all is fairly smooth. And it's gotten more smooth as we've written different books. The thing we learned partway through the second book was we learned what our sort of learning styles are, and our places that we're stressed or not stressed. And Christopher loves to research, and I mean he happily goes down all the rabbit holes, and he can be lost 8 scientific papers into something, and so far away from the original question that when I ask him, hey, did you figure that out? And he's like, what? So whereas I'm more like, hey, let's just, keep filling in the parts that need to be filled in the book. But once we understood that became less of a stress and more of we just kind of laugh it off as this is how we are both different. I'm more, looking to get things done in a certain way. And he's really, really great at the research. We just need to kind of rein him in sometimes. But this book was super fun too, because the other 3 books, I would say I took the lead on it a little bit more. And this book was his project, and he took the lead on it. So it was really fun kind of switching it up for this book as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's good advice for anyone considering that. It kind of ebbs and flows, which brings me to another paragraph in the book that I would love for you to read out loud. And again, on my script here, it says on page 32, it's titled, Make What You Like. Could you read that for us?
Our motto when it comes to making cider is life is too short, so make what you like, which means you need to know what you like before you can make it. That doesn't necessarily mean you'll be able to reproduce what you find in your refrigerator door or what you order at the bar on a night out with friends, but knowing what you like about those beverages will help you craft something that makes you happy.
Yes, that I think encapsulates what the message I get from the Big Book of Cidermaking where it speaks to everyone. And I know Christopher already mentioned that it's non-judgmental, but I think you've actually taken it a step further beyond that. It's not only not judgmental, it's an open door. You're really providing a book that says, hey, this is a party, come in and choose the cocktail that you want to drink here. And that's what you're doing in the book. Can you tell listeners of Cider Chat some of the recipes that you go through? You mentioned the wild yeast, but you're also talking about the stone fruit and herbs. And so what is the palette there that you're offering in this book?
In that beginning when we ask what's your adventure, and knowing that people could be coming from everything from I want something sweet and bubbly, to all the way down to I want something that tastes, like a nice Chardonnay, or I want something that tastes, like the New England cider I remember when I lived in New York.
And I want something funky.
So there's plenty. We're in Oregon, so we understand funk and the people who love funk. So, in fact, we've taught some cider making classes, and that term of how do I get a little funk started a few years ago, and now it's pretty common. People now not only want to know how to get funk, but they're starting to talk about different kinds of funk, which I think is pretty cool. So, we tried to break it up so that you would understand when you pitch a commercial yeast that yeast was once wild too. It just does something really well, and so we've controlled it. But there are people that understand that, so they're not afraid of wild, but they know also what might happen, and they're not, and they know what's going to happen if they're using a cultivated yeast, and they can choose that way. And then I think what's really separates the book especially apart is the botanicals, the yeast, capturing wild yeast, things like that, which is all Kirsten. That's something I was classically trained by Peter Mitchell. I like a lot of cider makers, and anyone that's taken Peter Mitchell's class, that wild cider is covered briefly with a lot of watch outs. Well, if you want to go down that craziness path, you're welcome to. But, Peter would say, there's no bad cider. There needs to be no bad cider because everything can be controlled, from a chemist's perspective. And wild cider is just a whole different ride. But, the more people understand just what's going on in that carboy, I think the more they can set up the right environment. And some of the wild ciders are just truly amazing. When you get them, it's just like a friendship that you strike up, travel. You have this amazing conversation for 3 hours on the flight, and you're never going to see that person again. Some of the wild ciders we've made, same thing, just amazing. And then the flight's over and you try to find that person the rest of your life and you never do. We've got some wild ciders that really were good, the best they ever were a few years ago. And we just haven't recreated that specialness like we did that first time. So
if you are somebody that wants to go down that wild route, you can really start to connect with the seasons and the years, because you can take, for example, blossoms, whether it's cherry blossoms or plum blossoms or manzanita blossoms, and you can see how every year they're going to offer something just a little bit different. And just back to what Christopher said, since I had no idea about cider making, I left it to him for the last 18 years. And then I, would take some and make vinegar. I didn't have any of the rules in my head, so I just broke them all. And I read about botanage, and Christopher was like, oh no, you got to rack it off the lees. And I was like, but why? And so we started that, and I would stir his lees up, and he'd get a little concerned. It looked like I was,
Rita, sometimes the botanage was unsanctioned. She basically stirred my lees without permission. Think about that. Just everyone in Cider Chat, think about that. But we're still married. And the damnedest thing of it is it often turned out better because she knew what botanage was doing, and I'd kind of dismissed it. And so I think the other thing is that if you go in with an open mind, maybe there's some things as cider makers we don't do because at some point somebody told us not to, or we had one bad attempt, and so we don't do it. But then you have something truly amazing with that technique, and if you can keep your mind open to go, hey, let me try this again. Maybe I'm missing something. So I'm a different cider maker for sure after writing the book.
I'm sure you are. And I think you hit on a couple pieces there in that it really is an art. And in the terms of that, it's never ending the learning that you can glean from making cider and where it pushes you, whether you're doing batonnage or not, as you said. And this book really sets you on that journey. I mean, you could go a whole lot further and further, right? There's even more we could talk about. We just talked about on the podcast about cracking, where you put the lees in a freezer and freeze it for a while, which makers do. But the basis of this book, the photos that drop me into the experience and how you do that with the lesson. And one photo that really kind of surprised me on how much I enjoyed it is where Christopher was talking about sweetening your cider, and the photo just caught the sugar. It was like granulated sugar, being poured into like a mason jar. And normally I think, oh my God, I don't want to put sugar in my cider, knowing that so many people really love that. But the photo was so well done that it challenged my views on that. And I want to thank you for that, because there is a whole bunch of folks who are listening to this right now who love a well-sweetened cider. And you really hit that. So were there parts of this that had to kind of push you to say, I want to talk about this is not my most favorite part?
Yeah, like for me, it would be things like sulfites, which I haven't used in a long time. I found some packages from maybe 12, 15 years ago of things. I didn't even know that they didn't make Camden tablets anymore. That's how long ago I would buy them. But I needed to embrace that again to say, there are situations where, for whatever reason, you want to start the slate clean. And so we talk about how to use metasulfites and other things to do that properly, so you are really cleaning the slate for some reason when you want to introduce something like that. And so again, that was challenging for me. I think the CBD infusion was kind of a challenging thing. We're in the middle of cannabis nation here in Oregon, and it just brought up a lot of things for me, because we've seen a lot of farms that have been just kind of raked over the coals by CBD or cannabis growing and water tables and pollution and all kinds of stuff. So we see kind of the negative side of all of that as farmers not growing it, but also realizing, it's a conversation that people are having, especially with just the CBD and, how to do it. And also the way you think you would do it is pretty gnarly. Like, unless you want to taste something that tastes like skunk or wet cat, dropping in some CBD oil or something into your cider just doesn't work. And so she learned from a local cider maker and kind of modified that technique. And it's really, the picture is kind of beautiful on how you do it as well. So I think that's something we pushed ourselves a little bit to try to master that thing that we've never actually done with cider before.
What Christopher's talking about is marijuana, for folks who aren't familiar with the term CBD. And this is, a component of marijuana, CBD. And of course, people are doing a lot of infusions.
Just quickly for the listeners, what the process that I use is capturing the smoke and then putting that on some vehicle to infuse the cider. What works really nicely is you can throw like chamomile blossoms in there, and then they'll capture that, and then you infuse the cider with that. So as I'm playing with it, I'm using all kinds of things, botanicals or whatever. And, I saw the chocolate nibs and thought, ooh, that could be interesting. And I did a chocolate nib infused CBD cider, and I took it down to one of our 20-something kids, and he took a sip and he said, Mom, people don't eat pot brownies for the flavor. So that one didn't make it into the book.
And I definitely know what your house smelled like that day.
We were just laughing about thinking about kids walking in.
No doubt. How do people get copies of this book? And when will it be released?
It was going to be released June 9th, and the publisher moved that out to the fall so that we could hopefully do a book tour. So it's going to be released September 1st now. Where they can get it.
We love pre-orders. Those are really good for authors.
Right. So pre-orders are wonderful. And then you'll get it, depending on where you order it, probably a little earlier than other people. They can get it anywhere. I mean, we love independent bookstores. And right now, I think in this time of crisis, I mean, if you have a little local independent bookstore, they're probably hurting pretty bad. So maybe if you would have used the bigger guys, maybe you can use the smaller guys right now just to try to keep that money in the community and keep those guys open, would be our kind of call out to that. Mm-hmm. And then hopefully we'll be on book tour in the fall, definitely on the East Coast. It's a good time to tour about a cider book, right, in the fall. Everybody's thinking about it. So
if you're the type of person that likes signed books, we also have on our website, which is ferment.works, we have, you can pre-order through us and we will sign them and send them out to you when they come.
Fantastic. And I think going into the fall is also a big holiday season. So whatever holiday you are celebrating, if you want to have a real nice gift for somebody who wants anything to do with cider, this is a book to grab. I mean, it's absolutely exquisite. And what a pleasure.
Yeah, means a lot from you. I really mean that. I mean that really honestly. We listen to a lot of your podcasts, when we were fine-tuning one thing or another. And you're a great interviewer, and you really bring out who it is that you're talking to. And I think just the other thing is, no one else has. I mean, there are so many episodes that in Ciderville. It's actually incredible, and it's like this library for all the future cider makers too. I mean, it's a real asset for the cider community. So when you say you love the book, it means a lot to us.
Well, I mean it absolutely. I feel it's such a nice addition to the world. This is not just a book for a U.S. audience, but worldwide, because the times that we're in right now regarding cider is, and I think the showcase really is happening in the U.S., that anything can happen. And you really justify that in a wonderful way. And so as we're just kind of fawning over each other, it's like, thank you. But that's Ciderville, right? We're all happy. So,
well, as I say, in the end, we both fawn over cider. So, that's our shared love.
Definitely. Right? There will be links in the show notes to this here episode 231 to help you pre-order your copy of The Big Book of Cidermaking by Christopher and Kristen Shockey. And if you're listening to this episode, once September rolls along and you want to get a copy, you'll be able to find that info there too by going to ciderchat.com, episode 231. Oh, I sure hope you have a wee bit of cider still in your glass, and if not, this is a good time to pour a little bit more, because I'd like to raise my glass and tip it to the following commercial operations who are supporting this podcast via the Cider Chat Going Up campaign at patreon.com. And that would be Process NMR Associates, LLC. They'll do analysis of your cider. So you could contact John Edwards. There is a link at the Cider Going Up campaign page. If you're in the UK, you know Ross Anwai Cider and Perry Company. Fantastic people there. That's the Johnson family. Cider Japan is Japan's first and only bilingual magazine dedicated to all things cider. In fact, they're going to be posting a translated version of Cider Chat in Cider Japan. So if you are a subscriber of that magazine, and I do recommend you do that, you'll be seeing some featured episodes from Cider Chat coming up in the fall issues of Cider Japan. Also, Space Time Mead and Cider Works. This is based in Dunmore, Pennsylvania. And I just love how Dan's email says, Time Lord. You should check it out because that's really cool artwork and brings in more of like spaceship stuff into cider and mead making. I just dig that. And of course, he's in Pennsylvania, and Pennsylvania's got it going on, right? Then there's some other folks who are just regular contributors, and that is Eden Specialty Ciders. Thank you so much, Eleanor Leger and the cider team up at Eden Specialty Ciders. Couldn't do without you and all the other patrons. Become a patron today by going to Patreon, that's patreon.com, and look up Cider Chat. And I will leave you here. This is Rio Windcaller signing off for now. Looking forward to seeing you in Ciderville.
We like cider, we like ponds, we love orchards and having fun. There is a reason. There is a reason why we do it like this. Oh yes, there is. There is a reason why we do it like this. Oh yes, there is. There is a reason why we drink it like this. Oh yes, there is. There is a reason. We like walking through the orchards, dancing in the streets, smelling all the blossoms, kicking up our feet. We like cider, we like ponds, we like orchards, having some fun. There is a reason. There is a reason why we do it like this. Oh yes, there is. There is a reason why we do it like this. Oh yes, there is. There is a reason why we drink it like this. Oh yes, there is. There is a reason. We like walking through the orchards, dancing in the streets, smelling all the blossoms, kicking up our feet. Oh yeah. We like cider. Oh yes, we do. We like ponds. Oh yes, we do. We love orchards, having some fun. There is a reason. There is a reason why we do it like this. Ba-da-da-dum. There is a reason why we do it like this. Ba-da-da-dum. There is a reason why we drink it like this. Ba-da-da-dum. Ba-da-da-dum. We like walking down the orchards, dancing in the streets, smelling all the blossoms, kicking up our feet. Oh yeah. We like cider. Ba-da-da-dum. We like ponds. Oh yes, we do. We like orchards, having some fun. Yeehaw!